can't. Show number, I want to say 382, 280 and 300. And we're going to talk about, well, we're not going to talk about something. We're going to talk to someone, but I'll
hello and welcome to Shiny
Dave. It's going to be
with
awesome. It's going to be just
Dave,
brilliant.
who's
It's
not
been a while since we've had someone to talk to. Well, it's on air, online, and on your smart device. So grab an app to listen anywhere, or listen at home on a Grace tabletop digital radio. Don't know why anyway, it's great though. I checked them out, Dave. I checked them out. They're really great. If you missed Solaris' show, shame on you, shame on me, every week. So I have to catch up after. But if you're wondering who she is, she's the phenomenal lady that is in front of us. Just a couple hours before we're on, she's published. She has documentaries, and she has a whole host of followers all around the world. Her topics are phenomenal as well. If you like psychotronic anything, you should listen to her. And if you have $5.95 spare, US that is, for a month, you can subscribe to the Freedom Sips archives and check out all her shows. So if you can't make this time slot, which is not really surprising considering what time it is over there in the States, then you can check out on the archives. You can check us on the archives. You can check all of the hosts out on the archives. So I think that's money well spent. In Australia, that translates maybe to coffee and not even a muffin anymore. I think it's mostly just a coffin that you get for that kind of money. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land here in Australia. For me, in my area, that is the Ruck people, and for Dave,
it's the Darkinjung.
The Darkinjung. Thank you, Dave. Absolutely. And we would like to pay our respects to elders, past, present, and future. No, it's not a gimmick. The people, the first people in Australia have been around for tens of thousands of generations. That's a long time, right? And it's similar with other First Nations people in the world. North America, Africa, South America, Asia, everywhere. Everywhere you look, there were people before white people showed up. What a shock, right? But there it is. Look, I'm still finding my way around the new website to check it out. It's had a facelift. I'll let Dave talk to that as well. Here in Australia, it is cold, but not terribly cold. In other parts of the world, of course, it is crazy hot. Crazy hot. Hotter than you would imagine to be anywhere, really, unless you're in the middle of the desert. India has gone through some massive heat waves. It's a good thing there's nothing wrong with the climate. Nothing is happening. It's all good. Just go back to your, I don't know, Kardashians. It's the Kardashians we're hating. I think I hate them a lot. But anyway, just keep watching those guys.
Just go back to the Kardashians.
They're going to be fine.
Yeah.
I saw an article recently, I can't remember where, online maybe, but it doesn't matter. The point is, in the article it says, the rich people are going to be okay. That's how it started, was the headline. I read it. So climate change, if you don't believe it, fair enough, but look, something is happening. But in any event, the article obviously believes the climate is changing. And it says, oh no, yeah, look, it's going to be the top 2 or even 10% of the world, they're going to be okay. They're going to be here. So if you had any sleepless nights, wondering if the super rich are going to be okay, I can assure you they're going to be just fine. But the thing is this, but the rest of the world, of course, is pretty much screwed because look, it is the poorer people that don't have the mobility, they don't have the freedom of choice to move places. And as we see today, I think I heard correctly, Dave. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I heard that they're going to open a fire at the border if they have to, right? The United States-Mexican border. They're thinking about opening fire.
Yeah, that's right. So allowing lethal force was the terminology.
Yeah, lethal force. Well, that's crazy. That's in my book, but who am I? So look, things are changing, but because they have put it into place, you can expect a lot of trouble coming that way because you don't put policies into effect of this nature unless there were a problem coming your way. It's similar here in Australia. Australia is all coastline. We don't have any neighboring countries per se. So if somebody wanted to come to Australia, they just rock up somewhere at the coastline. I suggest Northern Australia is not good. A lot of saltwater crocs and such, so I suggest you stay away from that. But we, I think, have an obligation to help our Pacific neighbors. And as their islands will sink, well, that's not entirely true. They won't sink. It's the sea that's rising.
Submerged, yes.
Submerged. So, I think we have an obligation to help certainly those nations and see if we can resettle them. But it's crazy. There's one piece of news I want to share. Then I throw you the frisbee, Dave. Do you remember? I think this was the first or second show that we had 8 years ago. There was a news story we shared around homeless people in Sydney becoming mobile Wi-Fi hotspots.
That's right. Yes, so I remember that.
Do you remember that?
Yes.
You remember that, right? So yeah, the Sydney City Council had thought, and this is a real thing. I don't think it ever happened, but they actually thought about it. They're going to attach these Wi-Fi hotspots onto homeless people. I mean, they pay them, I guess, like some money for it. And then you had these bunch of yuppies with their devices hanging around the homeless person. I guess that's how you integrate society, right?
That's right.
Anyway, it's a true story. There's a story this week that I thought topped that story.
Oh no!
And we look like any nation. Australia has homeless people. We've got people that live in the street. We've got people with mental health problems. In Australia, like in so many other first world countries, mental health is being dealt with very poorly. And a lot of halfway houses are closing, a lot of clinics are closing, so a lot of people are simply ending up in the street. And begging. What else can you do? So we have now become so affluent in Australia, specifically in Melbourne, which is, I guess, the second largest city in Australia, a little bit further south. So affluent, in fact, that we are now importing our beggars. No longer are local beggars good enough. No. We have Chinese crime syndicates flying them in from mainland China, into Melbourne, where they then proceed to beg, in the streets, at the street corners and so forth. And those proceeds of their begging adventures or ventures are then shipped back into China. Now, clearly, it is a lucrative business. You don't ship people from one country to another unless there were money in it. Because, the flight itself would cost at a minimum $1,000, right? Then you have to feed them, you've got to house them. You don't have to be opulent about it, but you have to do something, right? You don't want to kill them. And in fact, begging in itself is not illegal. There's nothing illegal about begging. The only thing they could possibly get these people for is a violation of their visa if you classify begging as some kind of income-gaining venture, some kind of employment. Other than that, and this is the kicker here, there's nothing wrong with it from a legal point of view. Wow. But nonetheless, there we are, Dave. We've got beggars flying in from China, and that's, it's like an organized crime thing, and they're begging specifically in the streets of Melbourne. I've seen them, because I traveled to Melbourne a bit for business, and I have seen elderly Chinese people wearing the things they're supposed to wear, according to the news articles. And yeah, I've seen them on street corners, and I thought, I've seen, man, there's a lot of Chinese poor people, elderly poor people in Australia. But yeah, so sorry, Dave, that's the thing, right? In my opinion, that beats the Wi-Fi story.
Well, yeah, it does, but it lines up with the thing that I used to experience, and I've discovered this myself, and I've kept quiet. Meckie knows about it, but that was the Sydney organised crime begging syndicate, which is a thing as well. And that was, I followed some heavies with a very well-dressed gentleman walking between the two security personnel and extracting the money from all of the beggars as a syndicate. However, each one of those beggars had exactly the same handwriting in the same piece of, like a very similar piece of cardboard with the same message inscribed on it. If you only saw one, it wouldn't matter. When you combined all of them together, I was able to draw a picture. Now, I followed these gentlemen go past, block after block as I was making my normal journey in the city, and I discovered that there was a thing. And it shocked me that maybe, it's more maybe protectionism on the beggars' part, because I recognised some of them. They'd been there for years, and now they've been, heavied or persuaded into, being part of this syndicate. I wonder if you're right, Meckie, if they only get a roof over their head and maybe they're protected. But, if it must be big business or big bickies if you're, and that's biscuits, big biscuits, big dollars if you're being able to, at an extraordinary cost, flying people around. That's something else. Anyway, I don't suppose it really should shock us anymore, right? I think in the last 10 years, I'm pretty much unshockable. I've seen so many things and learnt so much, and my grandmother, I think her words echo with me now. And you live long enough, you see everything. Was the word she is.
Right.
And look, that's true. And that was also in a movie as well called I Love You, Alice B. Toklas. Peter Sellers movie. Mackie, but look, so okay, so we've got climate change. I saw the talk about, and this was a piece done by a journalist talking about where the climate in India, saying it will soon be uninhabitable because of the temperature is now rising much faster than expected. And Mackie, like my esteemed co-host,
not faster than we expected it, Dave.
Oh,
so
yeah, we did. You and I did, yes. But the climate modelling was based on prior temperature increases and not where it was going to. So, it's the fault of the climate scientists not being able to accurately predict something that's unknown, right? Let's just put it that way. And we're not talking about a magic bullet and JFK. We're talking about the cumulative functions of this planet and all of the other inputs. So just working on carbon, or working on a temperature and the ocean temperature and what's happening where the winds are coming from, that isn't the full picture. Okay, so clearly there's been modelling errors, but those errors aren't at the fault of the climate scientists. It's just that we didn't have that kind of detail. There's no data there for them to work. Now, the climate scientists, on their defence, it's extremely sensitive what they're doing. They're so controlled that if they were to make an error, they're better to downgrade their findings or take the conservative route rather than go the alarmist route, because no one's going to listen. And the alarmist route is where we're actually going. We've exceeded all the conservative estimates by heaps. We're in the 2090s now, according to the climate scientists. We're not in the 2050s, where they thought we'd be. We've exceeded that now so bad. So this is the thing Mackie and I talk about every single time the climate comes up, climate refugees. Good luck with that, right? My belief is the UN should divvy up all of the people seeking refuge, right? I'm not talking about asylum seekers who fear persecution in the country they're leaving. I'm talking about refugees, so people that seek refuge somewhere else because they can't live where they used to live and where they've been comfortable. And if climate refugees, it just means you can't live in your country anymore because it doesn't support life, right? The crops get burnt by the sun, or the sea rises, right? Climate refugees. And maybe it's just too hot. 56 degrees, Mackie. 56 degrees is the estimate. And that's in like 5 or 10 years or something like that. It's going to be crazy. So you try and put those people anywhere, good luck, it's not going to happen. Most will perish anyway. And what's left up should be divvied up by the constituting member countries of the UN proportionately to their current population. That's the only way to handle it. There isn't another way of handling it. Unless you just have a, lethal force at your border going, well, and my question with that, Mackie, when I saw that news story was, who's going to pick up the bodies? They're just going to pile up. Because there isn't going to be people on the other side willing to, deal with their bodies correctly. And I think that's a great shame. It really is truly a great shame. Now look, live by the wall, die by the wall. Live by the cave, die by the cave. Live in open ground, die in open ground. It's just the thing. So whichever way you feel comfortable, and this is the big one, imagine you've built the wall and you're in the US. the southern border wall, and it's massive. I mean, Hollywood-style CG massive, like a 12-story building, right? Solid, super thick, as big as like a city block thick, right? And then you need to escape. That's funny. If you had to escape the US because of I don't know, some kind of like Yellowstone, or you talk about, Death Valley, for instance. I'm just going to bring that up in a sec. You have to flee the US. Good luck. See, live by the wall, die by the wall. So, Becky, my wonderful, best segue I've ever made. The earthquakes in Southern California, nothing's been seen for like 20 years. It's been totally quiet. Little murmurs here, the normal traffic murmur and all those, the Black Project flights still going and landing at Edwards Air Force Base, notwithstanding. However, 6.4 and then a day later 7.1 in amongst 2,318 other small quakes in exactly the same place.
It plays right into the earthquake activity we've seen all around the world. In fact, yeah, right, 7.1. That's exactly right. July 6th at 1:19 p.m. just yesterday. But there was on the same day there was one in Vanuatu, 5.6. There was one in Ridgecrest, California as well, 5.4.
Ridgecrest is
in fact there was like
Ridgecrest is the location of the 6.4, the 7.1, and the 23 other hundred of them. 2,300 earthquakes. Now it's actually
there was an enormous amount.
Yes. Now the only time we've seen this on the planet was when the Hawaiian Mauna Loa volcano and the 20-mile lava tube underground, then popping up as a spatter cone and extending the landscape, right, in Hawaii. So those quakes and that quantity of quakes is what was happening as the magma was eating its way down through 20 miles of Earth. That was the same quantity of quakes. Now, this is actually, all of these quakes took place in the same location, and there's currently a geothermal farm there which is pumping. It's got reservoirs. You can see it on Google Earth. It's pretty cool. So just look for Ridgecrest, California, and you'll see that it's about halfway between Bakersfield and Las Vegas, and the valley is littered with spatter cones and volcanoes from, and the spatter cones apparently were as old as, and I did some research on this week, the Ice Age. So they came alive around about the Ice Age time that we've just come out, about maybe 14,000 years ago. So, but I mean, there's hundreds of volcanoes there and spatter cones.
There's more as well, though. While there was a massive, like you said, 2,300 earthquakes in that area at the same time over the last few days. When I say last few days, I mean the last 3 or 4 days. We had, like I said, with Ridgecrest, of course, was massive conglomeration there. Where British Columbia, Port Hardy, 6.2, right? Yep. Suva in Fiji, 5.8. In the Maldives, Adu City, 5.8. Vanuatu, 6. In the Philippines, Camagüey, 5.9. And this activity is actually quite astounding to have anything that's higher than a 6, and quite a few of those as well in such a short succession. There was also an earthquake in Italy, I don't know if you heard, that actually killed a tourist. He was he was killed by actually volcanic eruption, killed by the rocks. So what we're seeing is increased volcanic activity, we're seeing increased earthquake activity, and I do believe, and you can call me crazy, and that's okay, there's a relationship of the earthquake or the tectonic activity we're seeing with the climate change. Oh, Maggie, now you talk the crazy talk. As the ice melts, okay, as the weight shifts. Thanks, Dave. I got the link. As the weight shifts, as the ice melts, and we're talking about millions of tons here. This is a lot of weight that we're talking about. it has a knock-on effect on the plates, and things that have been in equilibrium for quite a long time are being pushed out of equilibrium. Add to that effect something we mentioned last week, which is in fact the use of thermonuclear weapons in the atmosphere as well as inside the Earth, for testing purposes. And all of a sudden, you've got a very active, potential active geological state, because there's a lot of knocks we give it. We give the Earth a lot of knocks. We shift the weight, right? A knock the Earth can recover from, right? But once you shift the weight, that's a thing that you have to live with, and that's what we're doing.
If you consider the tidal movement of traffic in Los Angeles, if you call it, like for peak hour, people going to work and coming home again, that can be considered a tidal movement of a mass displacement, and that's enough to give you 1s and 1.2s. But 7.1 is 100 times bigger, or roughly, of a 6.4. It's massive, right? So, and I know that it's a pumping operation. I know what they're doing there, and I know it's geothermal, and that's fine. But you're working, and this is what's called the edge of the craton. That's the edge of the old plate where the new plate is coming up, and it bends around. It's on a line which joins at the end of the San Andreas fault, and we just hope, that's Mekki and I, we hope that we've seen the last of this. But if this continues, just maybe there is a new renewed volcanism at that point, and maybe it's going to have a little spurt. Maybe that'll relieve Yellowstone of some of that pressure. And the third place that we don't tend to think very much of, this, and that is the gravitational waves coming from the galactic plane that we're passing through. Gravitational waves are also it's an external. So we have the local knocking, we've got the actual tectonic plates, we have some movement, and we have a bunch of things. We have a relaxing of the poles, the weight on the poles. We have a whole bunch of things that are going on currently. But if you're drilling and pumping water and getting pressure underneath the Earth and using that for geothermal energy, you're also exasperating this. It's another element yet again. There was a short film that was made where one mosquito lands on a person and starts to drink the blood, and then there's, others see this, and then it turns into a factory, like with the pumping stations and all this, and it can only last for so long before the person falls down completely devoid of blood. It was a short film. It was pretty cool. And I drew the parallels to really what we're doing with the planet. And I don't quite agree with everything, short-lived views of, big industry doesn't really care. There's no, maybe the legislation is 25 years too slow to make any real, changes on this, or they just argue themselves. Nothing's ever going to happen, don't worry about it. It's just like fracking, who cares, right? It's safe. But is it? And it's just like smoking. It took us, 80 years for us to be able to do anything about it. Is the same with, radio frequencies and wavelengths and things that we're exposing ourselves to now. And think about this Wi-Fi's not been around that long. What is it, 14 years? Right? Is it enough? Is it enough for us to know any deep, considerations, on the human person?
So that's not entirely correct. So why we talk about frequencies here, Dave, right? So the particular Wi-Fi frequencies that we're using, we haven't been using, and certainly not 5G. Wi-Fi itself, which is just radio, really, has been around, 120 odd years or so. So we know radio waves are not going to kill us in the short term, but it is the frequency range that we're worried about here, right? And that's really the thing. 5G is going to expose us to. It's not hard radiation. I don't want people to get confused here, but within you've got different ranges of frequency that we are exposed to, and we've never really been exposed en masse to the frequencies that 5G is offering up. And because it is so powerful, right? It is such an intense frequency, if you will. There's some concern around that. And I have no idea. I hope that the reports are wrong. Because if they're not, then we will see cancer clusters in areas that don't have cancer clusters. And in fact, cancer clusters will be everywhere.
Yeah, that's right.
No, not just around the towers and such. It'd just be it'd be a horrific scenario if it's true. There's one thing though, and hopefully it's a segue into where we want to go with this. I've been watching a whole bunch of different TV shows, Project Blue Book, this and that and the other, and I realized that back in the 40s and 50s, people might have made decisions around information and how it should be disseminated to the people. Now, these decisions were wrong, in my opinion, but they are what they are, and we didn't get any information, and it was all kept secret. People were killed to keep the secrets, and so on and so forth. But now I was thinking, David, this is why. Now, the more I see it, when news are coming out, even the mainstream stuff that's coming out and disclosing certain things, I think the reason that is happening is because of a lot of the people that made those original decisions are dead. They've passed on, and it is like having the millennials enter the workforce. And now, if you work in an office environment somewhere or something similar, you can see a whole bunch of young folks coming through, I guess, for the last few years and becoming more and more in number and changing the landscape of your workplace. I think this is the same. I think this is very much the same, where the old guard is virtually gone, then the next generation, which sort of upheld the rule because they believed the old guard was right, they're now all being replaced by people that have a different kind of thinking, potentially. And maybe that's what's leading, or that's one of the factors that's leading to this information that's slowly seeping out, even in the popular entertainment media, right? It's because the thing is this: you can't keep it on everything forever. It's not possible, right? I'm still waiting for the 10-12 disclosures. Oh, you see what I did there? Which is going to happen. It's going to happen,
has
right?
to at
Eventually,
one point. Yeah.
And maybe not all of it, but quite a bit of it. But yeah. So what do you think? I think that's like we're seeing a change of the guard potentially of the keepers of the secrets.
Well, I do, and I totally agree. But I think that we should ask our wonderful guest that we've had. Now, he's been on the show before. His name is George Simpson, and he's a UFO researcher. I'll let him describe himself, but I'll say that he's with us again, and welcome. 5 years ago, my goodness me! Welcome, George Simpson, to Shiny Side Out.
Yeah, good day, David. It's 5 years? Really?
Can you believe it? Because it was MH370,
Sure.
Right?
Oh, it must have been...
It was show 122.
Show 122, 5 years, wow. Hey, well, thanks for asking me to come back. It's nice to be here.
You're absolutely welcome.
You can hear me?
Yes, we can, perfectly.
Great.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, it's hard to believe, because I remember the first time we spoke, George, was when MH370 occurred.
Oh, right. Yeah. Oh, that's, yeah. What a horrible thing that was, hey, when that happened.
Yeah, look, I was talking with some friends last night, and they're saying, do you think we're ever going to see it? And they're confident that it's going to turn up somewhere. They're totally confident. And I don't know. I'd like to believe that it is, so that people can get closure on the event, but with some strange things that have been going on, and there's a lot of aircraft cases, which, like, there's that ghost plane that landed, that was from Boston to Miami, then landed 30 years later, apparently, according to the stories. There's... I'm
not sure if I believe that one.
Well, I don't believe it, but it's still a story, right? But the Valentich case is up there. We still don't know, and there was no wreckage found. But we'll get into that one. But there's others where there was a Cessna flight or equivalent flight across the Bermuda Triangle, where he left and landed quicker than the plane's ability to fly. Saying that he went through a tunnel. Yeah. So he said he went through like a tunnel cloud kind of thing. It didn't seem to make sense, and when he called in, he realized he was already at his destination. With a whole bunch of weird things going on, and MH370, maybe there's something that we don't know of? Maybe there's another answer that we haven't found yet.
Just the MH370, the last thing I heard about that was that a piece of an aileron was washed up on a beach in Mauritius, I think, or on a small island very close to Mauritius.
Mm-hmm.
And it had barnacles growing on it and everything. So it's a few years since, so it's probably 2.5 years ago it was found.
Mm-hmm.
And it was identified as a part of a particular aircraft, of which there is only one that's gone missing since they started making that aircraft, and that was MH370. So it could have only been from that plane.
Well, I heard, I'm not disputing you, right? But I heard that the French aviation, I forget the team that's put together to solve plane crashes, and I forget what they're called. They didn't identify any stamps on those pieces as actually coming from MH370, and they disputed that it came from that, saying that these kind of pieces are lost occasionally on the planes, and this was all in French on a website at the time, and that they said that they can't confirm it. Then they refused. Well, basically they refused to confirm that the piece came from 370. They said it was the same kind, and they said it came from the same kind of aircraft.
Oh, that's interesting. Now,
yeah.
Okay, I know of another case very similar to that.
No.
I mean, they're saying this part that they found is consistent, but they fall off all the time.
That's what they said. Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's what they said about this part of the air intake cowling that was found off Flinders Island about 5 years after Fred disappeared.
Oh.
They found a piece of an aircraft, a Cessna air intake cowling. It was in the official report.
Yeah.
They tried to link it to the to Fred's Cessna, but they didn't get a match on the serial numbers.
Oh no!
And it was over 300 kilometres away from where he was last known to be when he was talking to them, because it was a couple of 100 metres from an airstrip on Flinders Island. It's more likely to have just come off another Cessna that was landing or taking off at Flinders Island. Apparently, this air intake part is only held on with a couple of rivets, and they fall off airplanes all the time.
I'm going to go into manufacturing those, I think. So we know that he was headed for King Island, which is, if you know what Tasmania looks like, the little island south of Australia, is flanked by King Island on the left and Flinders on the right.
Yep.
And so, look, the currents would take something towards Flinders, but it can't be confirmed, right? And you said the serials didn't match. That was the same thing about the 370 Aerialon, that every single component is stamped with 9M MRO, and that's the actual plane's number. That's its registration number. The flight it was on was 370, Malaysian Airlines Flight 370, but that's not the plane. The plane is 9M MRO, and it has a sister plane as well that was still grounded the last time I looked. So it's extraordinary. The Valentich case, though, for those who don't know, George, can you take us through what that means?
Well, this guy called Frederick Valentich was born 2 months before I was, so he would have been the same age as me if he was alive now. He would have just turned 61, actually.
Oh, wow.
A few weeks ago. I'm not quite 61 yet, but we were born in the same year. So he was 20 years old. He took off in his Cessna from Moorabbin, and he was going down to King Island. He was just trying to get some more hours up because he needs so many flight hours, recorded flight hours, if you're going for a commercial airline pilot license, which is what he was trying to get, a commercial airline pilot license. And he flew down there, and at about 7 p.m. he got to Cape Otway, where the pilots used the visual sighting of the lighthouse at Cape Otway that it's a landmark, you know where you are then, and then you report that you're going to now, from there, change your direction and head to King Island, which is due south from that lighthouse.
So it's a waypoint.
It's a recognised landmark that pilots use. So when the skeptics say, oh, he was confused, he saw the lights from the lighthouse and he thought it was a UFO, he'd been down there before, he knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
Anyway, the lighthouse doesn't fly around the plane, disappear and reappear and stuff like that.
No.
So, but that's what he reported was happening. But at 7 p.m, almost half a minute past 7 p.m, he called to the air services just to let them know that he was at that point and he was now heading to King Island. It was not yet night time, it wasn't dark. His return journey would have been night time, would have been dark. But it was, the sun had gone down, but we get a pretty long twilight period in Victoria in October. We get quite a long twilight period. And now I've visited Sydney and Queensland, and I've noticed that in 1 minute it's daytime, all of a sudden, bang, it's night time. You don't seem to get this twilight period, or if you do, it's very short. But here in Victoria, it seems to go for a long time. It could 3/4 of an hour or even an hour before it actually gets dark from when the sun goes down.
Nice.
And so he was in the twilight zone. Yeah. And it was still daytime, so there was enough light that if he'd landed on King Island, he wouldn't have needed landing lights. He would have been able to see where he was going. But to take off, he might have needed landing lights to leave. Right, so there was a bit of controversy about why didn't he call ahead and get them to switch on the landing lights. Well, there was no guarantee he really wanted to land on King Island anyway, because when you're flying and you just want to get your hours up, you go to a certain destination. You don't have to land though. You can just do a U-turn and go straight back. Right? So there was no guarantee that he was out to land the plane. And when he radioed that he was heading down towards King Island, he did report that he was at 4,500 feet above sea level. So that's, I think it takes about 20 minutes to go from something like that from Cape Otway to King Island. But anyway,
but
after
still in
about
twilight, right?
Yeah. So anyway, after about 6 minutes of flying from Cape Otway, he radioed in. He just said, "Do you have any known traffic below 5,000 feet?" And so that was checked, and the reply was, "No, there's no known traffic." And then he said, "Well, I seem to have something here that's flying around me below 5,000 feet." They said, "Well, what sort of aircraft is it?" And he said, "I can't identify it because it has such speed. It's travelling too fast for him to get a handle on what he's looking at." He said there was a bright light on it, or some bright lights. Then he says it vanished. Then he said it's like just passed over him 1,000 feet above him. At one point he says, it seems to be playing some sort of a game. Says that it's coming and going. It's like, there's a bit of controversy about one of the things he said, whether he said it's stationary or it's chasing me. Now,
right.
a NASA astronaut, Apollo scientist from NASA, Dr. Richard Haynes, came out here to give a talk about this case because he'd written a book about it called Melbourne Episode, Case Study of a Missing Pilot. And in 1998 he came to Melbourne to give a talk. That was held at Moorabbin Airport. And I actually audio recorded that entire talk that he gave. And Haynes himself says that he's got the transcript, but he's heard the recording. And he said when he heard the recording, it didn't match the transcript. He said that Fred said, "It appears to be chasing me. What I'm doing is orbiting, and the thing is orbiting on top of me also." Now, when that was translated into the transcript, it said, it appears to be stationary. I'm orbiting and the thing is orbiting on top of me also. Now, that does make sense. If you're going around in a circle to watch this thing that's flying around you, and it's flying in a circle above you as well, then from your perspective it may appear to be stationary. But he just said it's playing some sort of game.
Yeah.
Right? And one of the things that he said that they often get wrong when they read the transcript, when they're reading it out in documentaries and things, when they're reenacting it, they get this bit wrong. He says, it's passing over me at 2 to 3 times at a time at speeds I cannot identify. Now, think about that. What kind of an object can fly over you at 2 to 3 times at a time? What was this thing doing? Was it going around in tight circles? It's almost hard to imagine
doing
what this thing was doing.
What? It doesn't make sense.
Spinning around like the end of the rotor on a helicopter could pass over you 2 to 3 times at a time, couldn't it?
Sure.
This thing was moving very, very erratically and very, very fast.
Maybe he was describing the speed, like 2 to 3 times my speed or something.
But what he actually said was, it's moving so fast I can't identify. He couldn't identify what it was, and he couldn't identify what speed it was going. So he certainly didn't know what it was. And then later he reported that his engine had started rough idling, and at that point that's a more serious matter if you're an air traffic advisor and you're in contact with an airplane that's reported an unknown object flying around it, to then say, hey, my engine's, he said it was coughing.
Yep.
Now, he said he's got it set at 23, 24. That's cruise rev range. It's like, if you're driving your car down the freeway, you're sitting on 2 or 2,500 RPM, you're just cruising. That's your normal power operating speed. This is what the plane was doing, but he said it was coughing. The engine was coughing at that speed. Now, if it was idling, it can cough at that speed, but to be coughing at such a high rev range, that would shake the aircraft to pieces.
Yeah, wow, okay.
Right?
I'd not considered that before.
That's what Steve Roby said when we were talking to him about this. It would have been enough to shake the plane to bits. So he said it's passing over me at 2 to 3 times at a time at speeds I cannot identify. At one point he said it's a long object. I cannot identify more than that because it has such speed. And then he said that the engine was coughing, and at that point that's an alert phase for the air traffic advisor.
And what do they have to do when they because that's not, you're not just talking to them now you're handling an emergency.
Well, yeah, if you've got an engine problem and you're over the sea in a single engine aircraft, and it's nearly day, it's about to be night time, so we're just about to lose the sunlight, and the plane is having engine trouble, and he's reported his engine is coughing and is at 4,500 feet and is halfway between the land and an island. So the question was, what are your intentions? Now that question really has a lot more information in it than what it seems. Now Fred heard that and he just replied with, "Oh, my intention is to go to King Island," which everybody already knew that. But I think he's been asked, where are you on your journey? Are you more than halfway to the island? Is it a shorter trip to get to the island or a shorter trip to get back to the land? You were over water. You've got to, if your engine's plague up, you've got to get away from the water, or you're going to come down in the drink. Right? So, but he just said, "No, I'm heading to King Island." And then a few seconds later, he said, "Melbourne, that strange aircraft is hovering on top of me again. It is hovering. It's not an aircraft." And then this strange metallic sound, clicking metallic sort of sound, happened for about 17 seconds, and that was it. There was no more transmission. And then Steve called for him a few more times and got no reply. And that's how it ends.
Wow.
So it's a very, very strange aviation mystery in Australian history, and there is still no answer to it. Skeptics will say, oh, look, he fell out of the sky, he fell into the water, and planes can disappear in the ocean and then never get found. It happens all the time. Well, that's not actually true. If you crash a Cessna into the water, parts break off, parts float, and parts get found. You know. But they haven't found anything. That air intake that was found on Flinders Island was 300 kilometres away, and the serial numbers didn't match. But it was the same kind of part that you would find on that plane.
Well, the next day there was a sea search, wasn't there, as well?
Yep. The search went for about a week, and they didn't find anything. They found some oil on the water, and they tested that, but it was marine diesel fuel. So that had nothing to do with a small Cessna that disappeared.
But that was extensive search, right? So I remember that there was RAF, or Royal Australian Air Force, and civilian craft, and anything shipfaring was, seafaring was already on high alert, looking for anything.
Yeah, they had actual search patterns that they covered vast areas of Bass Strait in sweeping patterns. They did an organised search that went for nearly a week, and they found nothing. They even brought in an aircraft from an Orion aircraft from South Australia, which is an Air Force plane that's filled with very highly sensitive radar equipment and scanning equipment. They can scan the bottom of the ocean. The higher they fly, the deeper they can scan in the ocean. And they scanned the air and found nothing in the ocean, nothing under the water.
That's the Lockheed P3.
They said it was an Orion.
Yeah,
aircraft.
right. Yeah, okay.
But I'm not sure what.
That's the same aircraft. Same aircraft.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Wow,
They
that's
weren't-
extraordinary.
Yeah, they had like they could sort of from the air they could do basically sort of like some kind of almost like a sonar, but it's from the air. I don't know how they do it. It must be X-ray or something. I don't know.
You wouldn't want to be below it.
Yeah. But anyway, they never found anything, and so that's what happened to Fred. But there's a lot of other things that have gone on, other stories that have come out as well, that are really surprising with regard to Fred's story. Now, these stories can't be verified. I've been trying to verify them, but they're stories, and people don't use, because of the ridicule factor with UFOs, people don't use names. People will tell you a story, but they can't tell you who it was that told it to them, that sort of thing. But Bill Chalker?
Yes.
He contacted me about 5 years ago when we finished the documentary for the Science Channel, the one about the Valentich disappearance, of the unexplained files.
Yes.
He phoned me and he said, "Oh, look, did I ever tell you about that bizarre story from South Australia?" No, Bill, tell me more. He said, well, there was the story of a farmer who was, the morning after Fred went missing, had this UFO sighting over his property in somewhere around Adelaide, in the Riverina area of Adelaide, somewhere around Keith or something like that. And but they do a lot of grain, growing a lot of grain, and that. And this farmer was harvesting grain, sheep feed or something, and heard the strange noise and thought that it was coming from his equipment. So he uncoupled the equipment and went round to check it, but the noise continued. And then he looked up and saw this large object hovering above him. And this is the day after Fred disappeared. And he said it was a very unusual sound, like a screeching sound, like some equipment being run when it needs a new bearing or something like that. Anyway, he thought this thing looked like it wasn't very high up, but it didn't seem to be going fast enough to maintain its elevation. Thought this thing was going to drop, so he ran sideways out to get away from it, so that he'd be clear of it if it did come down. And he said when he ran sideways, and we have to go to a break.
Yeah, we're going to the break now. We'll see you
All right.
in a couple of minutes, guys.
Yep.
And stay tuned. We'll be back to hear the rest of this. Okay. Welcome back to Shiny Side Out with Dave and Mekhi. I believe the bumper's finished. Trust me, I think it is. Let me just test it.
It is.
It is. Great. No dramas. See, one sec. Oh, so not prepared. Hang on. Goodness. Having a
Bad host.
bad host.
Bad host.
Bad host.
Nah, it's all good. It's all
Oh,
good.
goodness me.
But while you're doing what you're doing,
No, I found it.
I've got a couple. You did?
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Oh,
There's a question.
Go
Well, there are a
on.
number of questions, and I do want to quickly go into that. And this is really around. I mean, this is not the only disappearance, obviously, right? It's just the most important or the most publicized, certainly in Australia, and the one that makes the least sense. But George, why do you this keeps happening? I mean, let me frame the question a little bit. So, in a force, I'm not saying who or what or how, is clearly doing something, and people are disappearing. Some are accidents, sure. Some can be explained, by swamp gas. I'm sure that's true too. Right? We got a running joke there, but there's a vast number that are the real. And then my question is, and I don't know in your research if you've come across it, why do you think it continues to happen? I understand if I paint a scenario. If an aggressive force came to us and tried to find out about weaknesses and probe us and do all kinds of things, you do that for a certain amount of time. Got it. You don't do it for decade upon decade. And in fact, from my researchers and others, it looks like it's been happening for hundreds or even thousands. Why do you think it continues to go on? I mean, this is, again, probably the most important case in Australian history.
Okay, well, what I'd answer that with the question: what is scientific whaling?
Scientific. Not fair point.
Why do we have to keep on killing whales for scientific purposes? We know their anatomy. What is scientific whaling? Yeah, exactly. Why can't we just leave the whales alone?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's one of those unanswerable questions. Why do these? Who knows? Look, there's an American. I was talking about this earlier today. An American, one of the greatest skeptics of all time. Is a fellow named Seth Shostak. He often has a go at UFO researchers and their stories and their claims and things. But he actually has headed SETI for quite a few years now.
Oh, no.
It's Shostak, yep.
Yeah, I know that guy, yep.
He was on Australian TV on a morning radio program, and I was lucky I was home. I hit the record button on the hard drive, and I've got this clip. And he's talking about how much life there would be in the universe according to what they think now. And he said, we didn't know this 12 months ago. This is about 4 years ago he said it. But he said, we didn't know this 12 months ago, but that 1 in 5 stars that you see in the night sky has a solar system like we do with all these planets and everything, and there's going to be planets able to sustain life in the Goldilocks zones on a great number of those solar systems. He said 1 in 5 stars that you can see in the night sky. Now,
Wow.
Whoa, how many billion planets, how many billion life forces, or how many billion civilizations are we talking about now? And he said that that has since been revised. It's 1 in 3
That's right.
stars that you see in the night sky probably has a solar system of planets, several of which would be capable of sustaining life. So there could be thousands of different species from different parts of the universe that come here or happen to come across us and want to investigate us. It's a kind of an unanswerable question, isn't it, really?
I look at this mathematically, and I've looked at that as well. The Drake equation, where it all started from, and that came from obviously Drake and Carl Sagan in Project Dolphin, where they were putting together the message to send to space, where they made a mathematical equation into musical notes and sent that out. Extraordinary. Just have to say, if there truly is that much life out there, which I believe they're highly likely, and if say you said it was 1 in 100, you still have 300 million
Billions.
300 million species out there, right? It's just and we'd be on the map. The Earth would be on the map, but there'd be if once you become spacefaring, you have like a map like the ocean, and you have all the places, and you have names for them, and if it's the 70s, then you say what exploits that place has, like coal or iron, copper. Today we think of them in like lithium and all the things we use today, but I have to say, if the three of us were flying through space, we'd have a map, and we'd have this, it'd be the map of the colonies, right? All of these separate civilizations and what they do and where they're at. The more importantly, where they're at. So that there would have to be something. It's going to be a Star Trekky here, but there would have to be some kind of agreement that once you're spacefaring, that you don't just go bothering people, or selling them technology for stuff, right? Unless they were in a specific age of travel or non-travel, or you don't non-travelers, right? Or whatever it is. Or if they've got nukes, or all of those things that we've heard in the past in lore.
You've heard the story, haven't you, that the Roswell thing happened because we were playing with nukes.
That's right.
And we created a few shockwaves and we were considered dangerous. Mm-hmm. We had to be checked out. Well, you know that the story follows on from that our nuclear weapons are often completely defused by these craft fly in. They zoom around our air bases and they completely decommission our computers that fire these things. So they're basically useless anyway. They're nuclear weapons.
Even the one that was test fire, where the UFO came in, shot some beams at it, and then flew away, right?
Yeah. Well, that was actually a dummy head warhead.
Yeah, right. So it tested it.
Somebody forgot to tell them, the ETs, that it was only a dummy one.
Yeah.
So they nuked it anyway. They knocked it out, out of commission.
That's right.
But the thing about the Valentich case, I just wanted to get on that before the break. We were talking about how the farmer saw the this thing.
I was going to take us back to the farm there, and he's decoupled his equipment. Hears this sound. There's something hovering above him. It's going too slow, just to recap. And he ran out from beneath it so that if it were to plummet from the sky, since its avionics didn't seem, and it wasn't going fast enough. Take us back there.
Well, what the story was that when he got it to the side, he could see that there was an aircraft stuck to the side of this disc.
Wow.
And he could see the entire wing, and he could see the registration number of the plane, and he scratched it into his tractor with a nail so he wouldn't forget the registration number of the plane, and it was DSJ. And it was the day after Fred went missing. Now, that story came from the farmer himself speaking to a guy who ran a hardware store, and it was something like 10 or 15 years after the fact that this farmer had moved up to New South Wales and somewhere around Coonabarabran.
Oh, wow.
And so he was telling the story to the guy in the hardware store in Coonabarabran, a guy called Laurie Ryder, who was a well-known character in the area. And we've got a tape recording of Laurie Ryder retelling the story because Bill Chalker recorded that conversation. But we don't know who the farmer was, so we can't check it out. We can't follow it up. You can't So if anyone listening to this radio show knows who the farmer was, please let us know.
Oh,
'Cause
wow.
we can't talk to the farmer. We can't talk to his family. His kids would have known. He would have talked to his kids about it. Or I've tried police records. They have no record of anybody reporting seeing an aeroplane stuck to the side of an object flying around over Adelaide. They've got no... You'd think the farmer would have told, but they don't have any record of it. Anyway, look,
Maybe if someone bought the tractor.
Well, yeah, but it would just have a number scratched on it. I mean, it could have been repainted even. Who knows? But I tried researching it. It's a brick wall. I just kept hitting a brick wall. I couldn't get anywhere. But there will be somebody out there who's heard somebody's uncle talking about it, or we don't even know if the farmer's still alive. He could still be alive, or he could have died years ago. We just don't know. But another interesting thing that's happened, though, that story had some unusual things in it. It's the only time I've ever heard of an aircraft stuck to the side of a large flying unidentified object which was able to sustain flight even though it had an airplane stuck to the side of it.
Yeah, right.
But a Cessna is a fairly small object. Anyway, later on, I wrote about this and put it into the Ufologist magazine because I used to write for the Ufologist. One of the guys reading that story, it tweaked something in his mind. He remembered his parents, who are now both deceased, but he remembered his parents telling him that there was some guy on television once talking about a flying disc with an airplane stuck to the side of it. And it was either, they couldn't remember for sure what TV show it was, but it was either the Don Lane show or the Willesee program.
Yep.
Now, they said there was some military expert, some military guy from America, some American fellow was over here, and he was going to be on this TV show, and it was advertised he was going to be on the show, and he was going to tell us something that we as Australians had a right to know about the Valentich mystery, something we didn't know about, and we had a right to know about it, and he was going to tell us. But to be on the show, he was demanding an armed escort to get from the hotel to the TV channel and from the TV channel to the airport to leave the country because it was such sensitive information. But he felt we had a right to know. Now, that didn't ring a bell with me. I don't remember that ever happening, but that should be in the archives if that ever happened. And they did keep all of the Don Lane shows, and they probably kept all the Willesee stuff. I got into Channel 9 to ask about this to find out, and they said that they weren't that helpful. At first they were quite helpful, and then when more information came out, they got less and less helpful, and now they're not helpful at all, which is interesting. But what happened was this. One of my friends and one of my Facebook contacts had been a producer or director at some stage of the Don Lane show. So I contacted her, and she said she didn't know anything about it. But one of her friends might have, because this friend of hers was in the show earlier on than she was in a production capacity on the TV show. And this other person did remember and said that she remembered who it was.
Wow. Who
the American official was. And is a well-known person that most people listening to a radio program would have heard of.
Oh.
This guy was involved in the Watergate scandal.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Now, this particular guy, right, I'll tell you the name in a minute. This guy was one of the guys who broke into the Watergate Hotel to steal those records.
Yes.
That had something to do with the JFK assassination, I believe.
Yeah, right.
Something to do with secret documents that were kept at the Watergate Hotel. Why there, I don't know. But this guy was an FBI person who ended up doing time. He was jailed for many years because of his involvement in Watergate. And his name is G. Gordon Liddy.
Oh, Gordon Liddy, right.
He was the guy who went on Australian television and demanded an armed escort to and from the TV station to tell us something that we really needed to know. We had a right to know about the Valentich case. And what he said was, this is what this guy's parents remembered hearing on TV.
Yes.
Was that Pine Gap was involved, and at Pine Gap, the American base, they have these flying drones that are circular. They're a disc-shaped drone. They can send them by remote control anywhere to do surveillance. They've got big ones and little ones. And one day, the big one that had been out over Bass Strait, one day the big one came back with an airplane stuck to the side of it. This is the story. And that Frederick Valentich was in the plane and he was alive.
Wow.
But now he knows more than what anybody's supposed to know about what goes on at Pine Gap.
Yeah.
So he will have all of his needs met. He's now working for them. He's not allowed to contact the outside world. Blah, blah, blah. They've got to keep everything top secret. Now, Gordon Liddy said that on Australian TV according to these people, right? And when they read my article that said that there was an aircraft stuck to the side of a disc, that's the thing that triggered their memory of hearing that on television. And I've got onto this producer who said that it was Gordon Liddy.
My goodness.
Right? So why would the American government send Gordon Liddy out to Australia to tell us this top secret information? All that stuff about I need an armed escort to get to and from the TV channel to tell the story, that's just to get people to watch the show. That's just hype.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? My life is in danger if I tell you this top secret information. You have a right to know about it. Yeah, and the story is bullshit. Right? But that was to get people to listen.
Yeah, right.
To watch the show and to now believe, see, it wasn't a UFO. It was a drone owned by the American government. We accidentally picked up a plane. So he's now working with us. You don't have to worry anymore about flying saucers.
So that's just the quietening news to settle down the hysteria.
Yeah. Why was the American government so motivated to go to that trouble to send Gordon Liddy out here to go on TV and tell us this? It's okay, folks. You don't have to worry about it.
That's a good question, because I was thinking, who's going to be threatening him with his life? He was an American military person. No one, right?
No, nobody knows, and who cares?
That's right.
Nobody cares, nobody knows, and so what?
Yeah, yeah.
But that's what apparently happened. Now, I've got the phone number of the lady who was the producer who told my friend that it was Gordon Liddy, and I've tried ringing her and I can't get through. I haven't been able to get through to her yet, but that's what I plan to do. I'm aiming to get onto her, to talk to her, to actually confirm with me that it was the Don Lane show, blah, blah, blah. I got back to Channel 9 when I heard this and said, look, have you got any of the TV shows that Gordon Liddy was on the Don Lane show? They said, no, he was never on the Don Lane show. But these people swear it was the Don Lane show and that he was on it. Channel 9 are saying he wasn't. And they actually said to me, no, look, Willisey, he was on, we do have a record of Willisey, of Gordon Liddy having been on the Willisey show at some stage. Right. But we don't have the rights to that. You'll have to contact Willisey himself directly.
Really?
Well, he passed away a few months ago, so he died of cancer. So we cannot talk to Mike Willisey, can we?
No. Oh my goodness.
So another door
Dead
slammed
end.
shut.
Exactly right.
Yep, exactly. But it's interesting, isn't it? Why would the American government be so worried about us thinking that Fred got taken by a UFO? That they would send Gordon Liddy out here. Did they have a deal with Gordon? Did he owe them something, so he had to come out here and do a little assignment to get off the hook?
Well, that's possible.
I don't know.
I mean, that's plausible, right? Well,
anything's possible.
Yeah. Because Stan Deyo, I know I spoke to you about this, George, but Stan Deyo said that he worked at Pine Gap and that they had created anti-gravity, or collaboratively with scientists from all around the world, including those from, during the Cold War, from the opposition. This was basically across the planet science fair where they were creating anti-gravity. He said that they created anti-gravity, and that's where he worked out of the base.
Yeah, right.
It's a little consistent with that Gordon Liddy story, but why would we suddenly say that we've got UFOs. That's the thing that I'm more concerned about.
I don't believe Stan Deyo. I've got his book, The Cosmic Conspiracy, and I think it's not worth the paper it's written on. I really don't. It's terrible. It's probably the worst book I've ever bought.
Oh.
A friend of mine recommended it, said it was a fantastic book, and it's just horrible. It's just like, I don't know, it's almost indescribably bad. It really is.
You heard
really
it
not
first, folks.
not worth the paper it's written on, I'm telling you. So I don't know if I can believe anything that guy said, seriously. But not him, not Stan Deyo. But anyway, just the other thing, though, what's really interesting, though, is that they're trying to cover everything up. Now, you know that this we've got this all this talk about the nuclear-powered warship that was having some sort of UFO encounter, and they call it the Tic Tac UFO. You know
yes,
that
I know
case?
the Tic Tac one, yeah.
And it's the Nimitz, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, when Haynes was out here telling us about the Valentich case, he mentioned in a private setting, he was going to tell us about an aircraft carrier that had a UFO encounter, and then he stopped himself. He asked me to turn off the tape recorder.
Oh.
He was going to tell us the story, but only if I turned off the tape recorder. But it wasn't the Nimitz. I thought it was, but it wasn't the Nimitz. It was the, it had a different name, the Vinson. It was a sister ship to the, as a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, a sister ship to the Nimitz, but it was the Carl Vinson, it's called.
Yeah, okay.
And I only know that because I got him saying that on tape before I turned off the tape. So he told me what the name of the ship was. He said that the captain of that ship told him something about that they'd had a UFO encounter of some kind and that it was an ongoing thing. He told us off camera a whole lot of stuff, which I can't remember all the details now because this is nearly 30... It was a long time ago. It was 1989 he told us.
Oh, really? Back then?
Yeah, when he was out here to talk about the Valentich case. And when he was telling us that he was convinced from hearing the Valentich tape that Fred said he was being chased, not that it was stationary, but it was chasing him.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, who knows? But that's interesting because this Nimitz case has come up and it backs up what he was telling us years ago about the Carl Vinson, that it was some ongoing communication between extraterrestrials and these nuclear-powered ships. Now, we know the extraterrestrials are interested in our nuclear power. They shut down our nuclear weapons regularly, and they're monitoring our nuclear-powered battleships as well. I think they're concerned about us playing with nuclear power.
Well, I share their concerns.
They're concerned.
Yeah.
I am too, yeah.
Yeah, I share their
Look at
concerns.
idiots in control. Did you see that... There's a cartoon getting around at the moment of Donald Trump. It's a cartoon picture of him from behind, sitting over his lunch. It says launch, but he's reading it as lunch, and he's about to press the button. He's going to get his lunch.
Last week at the 4th of July speech, he said that in 1775, the military took control of the airbase.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
I heard it on the radio.
Yeah.
I heard it on the radio. So people have got that painting of George Washington on the horse in battle saying, man the airports.
That's very funny.
It's fantastic.
You know the real story is that that they were using rocketry. So they were basically controlling the air. They weren't flying anything, and it was just one of the old Trumpisms, like the Bushisms, the George W. Bush.
They were hilarious.
I know.
He was such a funny guy. He's so funny.
I had the calendar, and every day there was a brand new one.
That's like the George Carlin calendar. Different joke for every day. Yeah,
that's right. And my favorite of all time of George W. Bush was, but the French don't have a word for entrepreneur.
That's right, they don't.
Hilarious.
They don't
anyway,
have a word for entrepreneur. Yeah.
That's right. French word, if you don't know. That's a French word.
Absolutely.
So no, it's very funny. So
French is apple pie.
So Donald Trump has his own idiosyncrasies, and look, they're fine. I don't mind.
Yeah.
I don't mind. Look, the next president is going to have to be a world wrestler, right? One of the WWF wrestlers, because then we'll be in idiocracy, and I'm going to be happy. It'll be fun. Look, that's all sarcasm, by the way.
I'll just mention one thing.
Yeah, go ahead, George.
Quickly, there's been a little bit of talk about who's going to be the disclosure president.
Mm-hmm.
If it's Donald Trump, nobody's going to believe it anyway. So
He'll get it wrong.
Yeah.
He'll say it incorrectly, but look, would you, if you were those people holding the keys, would you allow him to do it? Because everyone would have remembered it if it had have been Obama, right? Everybody, the whole planet would have remembered it in his dripping with charisma style of speech giving. Is amazing fella, right? That's the kind of thing that you'd want. However, Donald Trump, I think there'd be memes going from here till eternity.
I think they're at the point where they want it done and they don't care who it is.
Yeah,
they just
right.
want the information out.
Well,
It's been
the Tic
so
Tac
long.
video, the Tic Tac
It's
video
long.
itself had been
Yep.
kept for so long under wraps, and now the people are coming out about it, and I don't think so many people are dying anymore of mistakes and car crashes and heart attacks and cancer, who they've restricted from discussing these things in the past.
Mm-hmm.
My thoughts are, look, I think we must be close to disclosure. I can't see us being too far away now, but they've got to make sure everything's in place, right?
Well, it seems to be accelerating, yes. The process seems to be accelerating.
Mm-hmm. That sounds
new
like
TV series.
Yeah. That sounds
That
like.
new series.
I was going to say,
Sorry.
it sounds like your favourite pet in the background there.
Oh, we have a little talking budgie that flies around the house here.
Oh, awesome.
He's in the. He's great. He comes up and talks to you. He's great. His name's Freddie. He's named after Freddie Mercury.
Oh, cool.
And he actually says, my son taught him to say this, he says, "I'm just a poor bird, no budgie loves me."
That's awesome.
And he says it. Anyway, there's a new series, I haven't seen any of them yet, it's called Unidentified?
Yep, haven't seen it either.
I know, and it's a series about basic UFO stories being told, and it's Tom DeLonge is behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and he had a lot to do with this. I think he had a fair bit to do with this Tic Tac video coming out or whatever it was. The story was that there was a guy who was part of on the inside. There's probably, you've heard of the MJ-12 that
Yes.
developed into the MJ-200 or something.
Mm-hmm.
Such a large group of people that are all sitting on the secret.
Yeah, that's
It's-
majestic,
it has grown
everyone, by the way.
over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, but half of them want the truth to come out and half of them don't.
Oh.
It's a bit like Bob Lazar. He wanted us to know the truth that we're not alone in the universe, but we didn't have to know everything, like the weapon systems and things like that, or the weapons or the military connotations of it. We didn't have to know about, but he thought that we have a right to know.
Yeah.
The scientists hate what Bob Lazar's story is and everything. They just don't accept what he says. However, what he has said hasn't changed in 35 years, and he told us that there was a thing called Area 51, and everyone said, no, there isn't.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out there is.
That's right.
And
S4.
He said this, and S4, and they found out about that, and about unum pentium or Moscovium element 115. They said, no, that's all bullshit.
That's right.
It's now on the periodic chart.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they're saying he's a liar. He's lying. He's making it all up. Did he make up these other things that have now turned out that he told us about that are all true?
That's right.
Really? No, I don't think so. And these new documentaries, there's that he's been on the Joe Rogan show.
I saw that entire interview, and I was watching it like 15 minutes late from its live broadcast.
That's fantastic. It's such a good little interview. It's just the same information that he had on his original Lazar tape that came out in the late 1990s, whenever it was. He's still saying the same things. He's the only guy. They're saying he's not a scientist. He's the only guy I know that actually has a jet engine on his bicycle.
Mm-hmm.
had a jet engine in his Honda that he used to drive around on the roads. He runs his car on hydrogen.
Mm-hmm.
He stores it in a nitride form so that it's safer than petrol.
Nice.
And he hasn't been using petrol in his V8 for 30 years or more. Right?
Yeah.
And the byproduct is oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not putting out any pollution. He's putting oxygen into the air and a bit of water.
Terrible.
And they say he's not a scientist.
No, that's clearly the thing that I liked. You're right, George. The thing I liked about that interview was with Joe Rogan was that he said that he still considers himself foolish for basically the way he said it was allowing himself to be removed from the program by the actions that he took. Yes.
Yeah. Fascinating.
That's an angle that you wouldn't imagine someone would have taken on it, right?
And why? Why would he still be telling his story and going on radio shows now if it was a lie?
That's
if
right.
you told the lie 35 years ago, you'd be wanting people to forget about it because you might be found out that you're a liar. So you wouldn't be going on about it.
No, exactly. And he was in a bad place, and he took friends out to the letterbox, right, as we know it now. And on, it was a Wednesday nights, and they filmed it, and they got busted filming it on a subsequent visits. And look, the poor fellow, right? I think I believe every word he says. I've listened to it, the same story over and over again. My thoughts are, if they've been holding on to this for so long, what is the result? Surely they're at the point where we can have our fake alien invasion, right? If that's the case. And maybe they don't want this to go, maybe it's so easy. Maybe it's just, making metals in space is the only thing you need for it to work. Maybe it's so easy and simple that everyone could do it, and then there'd be no control over it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a power source that doesn't even exist. Like it just like radio waves get picked up by an antenna only if you have a specific crystal. I used to make a crystal radio when I was a kid.
Yep.
But you wouldn't know that the radio waves existed at all unless you had the right tuned aerial. Maybe it's the same kind of thing. Maybe it's you're just deriving a way of receiving the energy. I don't know personally.
Well, he was saying that they know so little about it, and so few people have been involved in it that they still haven't been able to make that much progress after all these years because they still don't understand all of it.
Wow.
But it makes sense to me, and that thing about being able to travel vast distances across space, which was on the original Lazar tape, because you've got control over gravity. You can bring the distant place to you by warping gravity, and then just turn off the machine and you're already there.
That's right.
It just makes sense. It makes more sense to me than just about any other scientific stuff I've ever.
Well, the whole mentality around that, right? The physics around it. You grab where you're going to go and pull it to you, and then let go of where you are, and you're at your destination. It just makes sense.
Space goes back to where it was, and that's right.
From an observer point of view, it looks like you've just darted off to the horizon, right? At unimaginable speed, but you haven't.
But my point of bringing this up is this. One of the side effects of having control over gravity bends light as well as it changes time and stuff as well. But gravity can change the way light bends and light is refracted. Now, one of the Westall witnesses...
Oh, yes, Westall, yes.
...said something that backed this up. She said that people get annoyed with me. In this interview we did on a radio show years ago, on the Jeff Brent's show, I had to get all the witnesses together and put the show together, and I couldn't go on it myself because I had to work that day. But anyway, this lady was saying that people get annoyed with her because when she was out there at the back of the school watching these things flying around, people said, well, how many were there? He said, well, I can't tell you for sure. I can't give you an exact number because you'd be watching it going along in the sky and it would just disappear. But then it would appear 500 metres further on. And you don't know, because it disappeared momentarily, you don't know whether it's the same one reappearing or a different one reappearing. So how can you count them? How can you count them when they're disappearing and reappearing in front of your eyes?
Yes, that's right.
And there are and there's several of them. It's impossible to get an actual solid figure of how many there are.
That's a good point.
Right? And that's what she said. And that's what Bob Lazar said, was these things virtually disappear in front of your eyes because of the gravity. It bends the light rays and they cloak themselves in the gravity. And so you're seeing the light behind them. You're seeing the sky behind the object, but it's right there in front of you, but you can't see it.
Because Westall was, around about 200 people that witnessed that?
Yeah. But this witness said that on radio, and I've got the recording of it.
Yeah, wow.
But, now, the other thing is, you know about the Baldwin photo?
No.
It was taken 2 days before Westall. You don't know about the Baldwin photo?
No.
Well, anyone listening to this show, go to Google Images and type in Baldwin UFO photo.
Yeah, okay.
And you'll see this photo come up. It's a blue sky and a bit of dappled cloud, and there's shiny flying saucer object sitting there, but it's sideways. And that's really interesting because the guy who took the photo said that it was a dome with a flat bottom and it had risen up from the ground, but it turned 90 degrees, turned sideways, and then shot off. And that's exactly what Bob Lazar describes about how these things work, because their gravitational amplifiers are put from the, it talks about the Omicron configuration and a few other configurations that they can angle these things to direct and to travel around. But this thing can just hover in the sky. Now, one of the Westall witnesses, who was actually at another school near Westall, saw the object on its way to Westall, said that it was like a wheel, not like, if you throw a frisbee, it flies like horizontally.
That's right.
But this was just sitting in the sky vertically.
Oh, wow.
Right? Because it had turned sideways to head off to Westall.
Oh, yes, of course. Like it was banking, right? But
well, they turn 90 degrees. They look like they should fall out of the sky.
Oh, wow.
But they just sit there side on like a motorcycle wheel without the motorcycle, but up in the air. And then they travel. And they travel, they don't travel in an aerodynamic sense at all. They travel like a block of wood going straight through there, you know what I mean? They don't follow aerodynamic principles at all.
Yeah,
and that's what
no
the
regular
report.
flight characteristics as we know them.
That's right. This thing was photographed by that guy, his name's James Kibble, and he's going to be in a documentary coming up soon. It's been done. The same producer, James Fox, who did Out of the Blue and I Know What I Saw, the two great UFO documentaries. He's got this new one coming out, and it's actually got an interview with James Kibble in it. That's a major breakthrough. But what James Kibble's photo, this Baldwin photo, shows is this object sitting there side on in a blue sky, and it's a Polaroid photo. Now, investigators have looked at it and said, oh, there's a zigzag line. It's been cut and pasted. No, that's bullshit. It's an old Polaroid system where you had to peel the photo off the chemicals the back of the camera, and he didn't peel it evenly when he peeled it off, and it was old, expired film when he took the photo. So it's a wonder we even got a picture, and it's just an artifact of the process, of the Polaroid process. It's nothing to do with anybody trying to fake or cheat anything. Kodak investigated that photo and said that they believed it was genuine.
Oh, wow.
And that they could see, Kodak Lab in Coburg, which is not there anymore. And they said that you could actually see, with a microscope, they could see reflections of the terracotta tiles from the roof below in the shiny object.
100%. I've just posted a re-evaluation of the Baldwin UFO photograph by Francois Bellieu. in 2007. It's called Project 1947, and it goes to some excruciating detail and concludes that the picture is in fact... No, it does. Read it, guys. It's in fact a real picture. There's no way it could have been doctored. And you're right. The actual UFO has a reflection of the roof of the house in the foreground. It's virtually impossible. No, actually, it is impossible to fake, especially with a Polaroid camera.
Well, the guy who took the photo saw it and hurriedly picked the camera up to get the shot and hit himself and nearly broke his nose with the camera when he took the shot. Oh,
really?
Yeah. No, but that thing turned sideways, and it's a photo of it sitting sideways. Now, there are people that were involved with the Westall. There's a guy who got involved with Westall. His sister was at the school and saw the object, but he didn't. He hates this photo and tries to discredit it all the time because he doesn't like the photo.
Oh,
UFOs don't sit sideways in the sky. He doesn't like the photo, and he doesn't want it to have any connection to Westall. But the interesting thing was it was taken 2 days before the Westall incident, and the object is the same, matches the description of what the students said they saw. Mm-hmm. But also, some of the witnesses said that when it took off from the ground, it turned sideways and then shot off, which is exactly what you see in that Baldwin photo. And
an amazing photo too.
And it is also consistent with what Bob Lazar tells us about how these things work. Mm-hmm. It's how they operate, which to me just verifies the veracity of that photo. So to all the people that don't believe it and say that it's been faked or whatever, well, I think you're wrong.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion. Yeah.
I like that you can even see the chimney on the house in the reflection.
Well, I've stood in the street where that house is, and that chimney is still there today.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've got a photograph of it.
That's awesome.
The people that live there now are not the same people that were there years ago when the photo was taken. Wow. But they're getting used to people coming, strangers coming and knocking on their door, saying, "Can I stand in your garden and on this angle and get that chimney?"
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah, the house is still there. It's in the suburb of Melbourne, Deep Dean.
Look, I know that Westall was 1966.
Yep.
78 for Valentich?
Yeah, that's 41 years ago now, yeah.
Yeah, right. I know I've had my own experiences with an orange orb that just flew silently and really slowly across my driving path, and I slowed down so I wouldn't go under it.
Yep.
And then it went into the ocean. That's the rendition. I believe myself when I saw it. My brain was telling me that it must have been an engine from a plane, and that for some reason it fell off the plane. My logical brain was telling me that I wasn't seeing something extraterrestrial.
Wow. What ocean? What part of the ocean? Where was that?
This was just north of Coffs Harbour.
Okay.
And I've totally documented it.
I had a guy who, when I used to be doing a lot of investigation for the Australian UFO Research Network, a guy who rang us up and I had to ring him back. He had been on the bridge of a ship just around the point of when Cyclone Tracy hit Darwin. So that's back in 1973.
That's right.
He was on night watch, and he said that he saw an object that they saw an object that they thought it was a fireball going across the sky, but then it slowed down and did a U-turn.
Yeah, yeah.
And then it came down low over the water, went right past their ship, and then it dived under the water and disappeared. It was just before Cyclone Tracy in Darwin. It was up near Darwin where it happened.
I completely understand. Before then, I wasn't. In fact, I didn't even know orange orbs existed until I saw one. I had no clue. But it went down over the headland into the ocean. It was only probably doing 20 or 30 kilometres an hour. It really wasn't going very fast at all. And
no idea what size it might be?
Yeah, my estimations were it was a road width. So.
Oh, okay. Roughly, okay.
Yeah, roughly a road width. And so it was reasonable, but it was it was interfering with the atmosphere at the low altitude it was going at, which was only, I don't know, 30 meters above the road. And that moist air that comes on shore from the sea, that's a salty, moist air in the valleys.
Yes.
Well, it was interfering with that and causing a little wake below itself on the lower eighth of the craft, or the orb. That whole thing happened with, from first seeing the thing, which I didn't understand what it was, recognizing it was moving, and then going to go intersect my path, but I slowed down so I could let it go in front of me, really close, by the way, like maybe I was very cautious, probably about another maybe 20, 30 meters away from it. And it just drifted, and I was completely stationary. There's no other vehicles on the road at all. And then it was like 3 a.m, and then it went over the headland behind the trees, illuminating them as silhouettes, and then just plopped off into the ocean off the headland.
Wow.
It's like, what did I just see? Well, and then I started my car going again, and I kept thinking, there's definitely going to be something in the newspapers about this, right? Nothing.
Oh, question. You said you started your car going again.
Oh, no. I just commenced driving. My car did not cut out.
Oh, okay. Because they often do when
I
these
know.
things go past. Yeah.
There's another story about that. But this that was what happened. And since then, I have found out about that popsicle stick Viking ship that was created in Holland by an old adventurer, stuntman who spent a lot of his childhood in hospital with disease, and then he just started giving presents to children in hospital because he didn't have very many visitors at all. And one of those things that he did, he made a Viking ship out of popsicle sticks, ice cream sticks, and each layer was specifically generated as a piece of paper, and they had the placement of those sticks and glued the entire thing together. Extraordinary thing. On its maiden voyage with a crew of children, they sailed out and then had an experience with an orange orb that was under the water.
Really?
Yeah, it lifted their popsicle. This is all in Dutch, right? It lifted their ship up, and their popsicle, Viking vessel no longer pitched with the ocean any longer. It was within that sort of that bubble that's created around the outside of the craft.
Right. Okay.
And it wasn't on the water any longer. And they shot a flare off, and a ship came to their help because their mast broke. And when they came up close, and the ship had to come out of the shipping lane and help them, as the thing darted off to the horizon so fast you would believe it to be flying in the air, but it wasn't, it was submerged. 2 helicopters came from the land and came directly over their vessel and looked like they were in pursuit of it. He said. And then when they got back to shore again, there was a crew of dark grey, epauletted, sort of military jumpsuity kind of fellows who told them they're not allowed to talk about it, anything. And he walked outside of that meeting agreeing with them, straight to a press conference, and told them everything.
Wow.
And
I've never heard of that one before.
Well, you'll only find it in Dutch. It's not. There's no English version of it. But I've heard him talking about it on someone else's show. It was the first time I encountered it. Then I found the newspaper articles. But apparently, there's an orange orb military section of government somewhere on the planet who is the cleanup crew for this.
Mm.
Don't know. It looked like it was maybe a solitary or a dual occupant kind of craft, but on the outside it looks entirely like it's molten metal. That's the colour, I would say. Mm. That glowing iron from a foundry. Mm. It's not consistently the same orange everywhere. It looks like it's has difference in colour from temperature variation. It's the only way I can describe it. Well, extraordinary stuff, though.
Like this captain of the ship that was
yes,
near Darwin.
Yep.
said that the object looked to him like it was ancient.
Wow.
It looked really, really like it was ancient, and it looked like it had been damaged by going through meteor showers and that, because it had dents all over it, like it had been used for thousands of years, and it was damaged all the way around the outside of it. One that went under the water.
Wow. Well, look, haven't explored very much of the sea floor, and maybe it's quite possible that there is the whole civilization going on. It would sort of make sense, at the end of World War II, those two carrier groups went down under Admiral Byrd down to the South Pole, and they came back limping with huge losses. It seems to make some kind of sense. Is there really something that's an uncontrolled more threat or non-threat in our airspace? Because you hear the military, US military, say, well, it's not a threat. That's what they say. Okay, how did you determine it wasn't a threat? I mean, they can fly fast, they can do things to us. You're just conceding that they're better, and if it wasn't,
knock out our systems.
They can.
Yeah.
You hear this from the nuclear bases, that the people said that their missiles went into a funny state and they couldn't turn them off, and up on land, because that's an underground base where the missiles in the silos, but the guards on base said that there was a object hovering stationary and put a beam down or whatever. These are trained observers, right?
This is the issue, of course, that these people are trained observers. There's a different school of thought that says we on the surface of the planet are in fact like the third world in comparison. Like the United States and a third world country, it doesn't really pose a threat to the United States, but they would fly over it and might interfere with it. So some school of thought think that there is an inner Earth civilization or an ocean floor civilization or something like that, massively advanced compared to us, and we are really just the third world on the surface, exposed to all the hard radiation, and why would we live on the surface anyway, right? So a lot of things make sense if you look at it that way. I'm not saying that's what it is, right? It's sobering, considering that we think of ourselves as the pinnacle of everything. Clearly we're not, but look, there are mysteries upon mysteries, and it's really great to have your thoughts on this, George. And I've done some Googling around as well. You recently last year, there was this article about you in the Chronicle, which is great. It's just commemorating the Fred Valentich disappearance, and this picture of you and Mike Hodges, who in fact serviced Fred's Cessna 182 at the time. So look, I'm glad it is not being lost, this information. I'm glad people are still interested, and because it means the Chronicle, which is obviously an Australian publication, is still interested enough to actually have an article about this. I think it's fantastic.
It is, yeah. Well, there was the 40th anniversary of his disappearance last November, and we had like a memorial type of thing at Moorabbin Airport, which was the last place he took off from. And we had Steve Roby there, and took quite a few photos. And his girlfriend, the missing pilot's girlfriend, Rhonda Rushton, was there as well.
Oh wow!
And Steve had a few words to say about it, and it was a very good day. And John Ockertell had a few words to say as well. He was one of the researchers in Viewforce when I was there, so it was a really good day. Yeah. But it's 40 years ago, last October, that he disappeared. So it's I don't know if we'll ever get the answer, But I do really wonder why they sent Gordon Liddy out here to tell us that story. It's just amazing to make us think that there was no UFO involved. There you go.
I just wondered that maybe that was the truth. Maybe it wasn't. Well, maybe it was. I don't know. It's confusing for me because I'd like to believe that we had anti-gravity control, and maybe it was coming out of Pine Gap. That's a very interesting case. But is that just to try and own the skies again, or quell, disbelief, or give the society a reassurance that everything's fine?
why would this guy, the histrionics that he went through, I need an armed escort to get to and from the TV channel to tell you this story that you need to know. Come on, give me a break. Doesn't that sound like bullshit? Serious.
It does, George. I'm with you. I'm with you 100%. And it's all about the red herrings. And it's a misinformation campaign. And Liddy, I mean, if you look at his bio,
what's his
it would be
record?
perfectly placed. It is, 100%.
He's the right guy. He's the right guy to be doing it. It's unbelievable. It's
I'd like to talk to him. He's still alive. I'd like to have a chat to him. Okay, there's the music.
All right.
Yes.
I'll get an answer. Good luck.
Thanks so much, George. Hey, it's great having you with us. Stay tuned for Jer Bear's Roundtable and be a part of radio. Call in. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
Donate if you can. Donate if you can. Thank you, George.
You're up.
Okay, we're clear. That was fun.
We're offline now.
Yeah, we're offline.
Cool. So does